been in the e-commerce space for a lot of years, owned 7 brands over that time. I'm running one of the biggest agencies in social commerce, and I am obsessed with all things e-commerce. Today, I'm going to be bringing on a tracking expert who is going to be talking about Meta's big advertising changes that are coming up incredibly soon to sensitive categories. Today, we are going to be hopefully walking away with a pretty clear roadmap of number one, what is going to be happening in Meta's new privacy categories, the implication of there not being any bottom of funnel events for these, what happens in adjacent categories, and some potential solutions for tracking. So I've got Noah King on with me. Noah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Jordan.
Yeah, good to see you too. So walk me through, first of all, for people who don't know anything about you, what's a bit of your experience in this space?
Yeah, so most people know that currently I'm the CEO and co-founder of Popsicle. We do work with Meta as a data partner. We basically send signals between e-commerce websites back to ad platforms to get better attribution and tracking. But I used to work in big agencies, and when I was at big agencies, I worked on the healthcare and finance teams. So I am really used to having to navigate these policies and data compliance and working with lawyers and things like that. That's part of what led us to starting Popsicle. But certainly at moments like these where, let's be honest, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of misinformation, and at the end of the day, you just have to know, what action do I need to take, what's the path forward. I
Yeah,
feel very comfortable in those situations.
that's great. Well, when you reached out to me after I started to talk about this a little bit, I was really happy to get to have your view on this, because I feel like there is some potential here for this to be devastating for a lot of brands. And you reached out saying, "Hey, I think I've got some number one solutions, and number two, some data that's going to actually help us get to the truth of what is actually happening here." Knowing that you've worked in both of those industries, which will both be affected by this, by the way, healthcare and finance. Tell me what exactly is happening.
Yeah,
Number one, why is Facebook doing this? Do you know? Any
I do
ideas?
know. So we meet regularly with a legal team to basically talk about the changing data landscape. The last few meetings that we've had, and it's now January of 2025, Q3 of 2024, we actually just launched today a whole bunch of changes on our site with our product. That's a separate topic.
Yeah,
But
we'll
in
make sure to link
preparation for
that down in
that,
the description in the show notes, by the way, guys.
sure. Yeah, it would just increased GDPR compliance, increased control over what data gets sent and not sent. But this is our whole business, right? So we were having the calls with our legal team back in October, and they basically said, "Oh man, there's all these lawsuits happening." So apparently the lawsuits have to do with, there's some niche law. I think of like Blockbuster Video in like 1985. Imagine if somehow the history of the videos that I've been watching was leaked. And maybe I'm watching some videos I shouldn't be watching, and I don't want my wife or my church or my friends to know about it. That's considered my personal information. So there were these laws passed in the 70s and the 80s. And it basically had to do with, not disclosing someone's viewing history. Well, apparently some lawyers today have been very aggressively suing both brands who own the websites and the pixels, as well as Meta. And for example, let's say, I'm a teenage girl and I'm pregnant, and I'm online looking on a Shopify store that has pregnancy tests, or maybe a plan B to terminate a pregnancy, whatever it might be. That is my personal health information. Those signals are being sent back to Meta, and it basically says person X was on this site and they converted. Well, Meta is just a big machine learning system. It's not like there's some person there who's keeping tabs. But now all of a sudden, that same girl logs into Instagram and it's going to be pregnancy this, baby that. And she's going to go, what the heck is going on? And not only does that feel violating, but it's actually potentially illegal. So
This
the
is
jury
such a
is
good
still,
use case for
yeah,
this, right? Because then think about if there's something to do with IPs as well. What if dad goes on
there
to
you
his
go.
Instagram and
Yeah.
sees all of this, or mom, right? And you're like, well, no, actually, in this world, we should have privacy between these. That should be her information that she gets to tell, like being a human.
Yep.
I was actually not on board with this until you used that example.
Let's go through a couple examples. So that's one where you're basically, you might feel humiliated or embarrassed, or it's going to force some very awkward conversations prematurely that you didn't realize you were going to have.
Yeah.
Now imagine if if I'm diagnosed with cancer and I go onto a website and it says, do you have cancer? Yes. Do I want to get this whatever kit, whatever the product, a medical device or diabetes, a health product? Well, now all of a sudden, big tech knows that I have cancer, and maybe I haven't even told my boss. Maybe my health insurance doesn't know. I mean, that's really scary stuff, and that could impact your job. That could impact your health insurance, your finances. So I'm not here to be an arbiter of the truth, but I can see how this is a very messy situation. And Facebook was like, "Whoa, we don't want to send this data anymore. This is
Yeah.
this is data that's way too risky. Like all bets are off."
Any ideas why other platforms aren't doing the same thing?
So I do have one idea. This is speculative. This is my personal theory, but back in 2018 when Cambridge Analytica, that whole scandal first happened with Facebook, and they didn't just get slapped and embarrassed, they got fined $5 billion by the FTC in the US.
Wow.
There is now an FTC steering committee that meets with the Facebook board of directors and all the Facebook senior executives, and it's basically like having, someone with a whistle on staff saying, "Oh, no, 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 you need to follow, same with iOS 14, you need to follow this rule strictly. You got to get your ducks in a row." So I think Facebook, because they were made an example of, is now at the forefront, and in my opinion, does a pretty good job of not just navigating this well, but being first to maybe set a new policy.
So this affects a lot of brands, right? A lot of brands. So
Does it? So let's
I don't
dig into
know.
that.
I don't know.
So who's impacted?
That's my
That's the
question.
question. Yeah.
I'm going to
Who's
put that out
impacted?
there. I learned this recently on a
Yeah.
Diary of a CEO podcast, that you don't ask questions. You make statements that might be a little bit wrong, and then the other person really wants to make sure to tell you the truth.
So no, you're asking the perfect question. Who is impacted? And how do you know that you're impacted, right? So I agree and I disagree. What I agree with is, if you are impacted by this, this is not a small thing. This makes a huge, huge difference. Potentially all your data just is useless. And
Which data do you have access to is the question that I ask first.
what do
Like,
you mean?
so which data are you allowed to track anything from users? Like a
So
landing page view.
we need to dig into it. So
Yeah.
there's three levels of how this works. Let's break it down in a few different areas. So who is impacted? So if Meta determines that your website has sensitive information and basically knows something sensitive about its users, you are possibly going to be impacted. And the way that Meta does this is in the events manager, which is basically and I can share my screen. We can look at an example. In your events manager, your website domain gets flagged as a special category. Ooh, this website has financial information, has health information, has diagnostic information. If you are impacted, there's three ways that you can be impacted. The first level, I don't think is that big of a deal. The first level is they basically trim the data that's being sent with the URL. So imagine if I'm a skincare brand and I sell moisturizer, but then I have a product that's meant for people with rosacea. Well, that's a condition. Well, if I send a purchase event and it says, skincare.com/rosacea, well, now Meta knows that I have rosacea, right? So
Gotcha.
it would truncate the URL and it would just say skincare.com. That's not that big of a deal. It means that if you're doing dynamic product ads, if the URLs need to be that granular, they're not going to be that granular. I really don't think that that's that big of a deal. That's level
I
one.
don't think that that's that big of a deal either.
If that were the whole thing, we wouldn't be talking. So level one, that's what's going to happen. And I'll show you when we dig into it. There's a whole section where it shows you, are you impacted? Is this truncation happening on your site? And if it is, no big deal. Okay, level two is a big deal. Level two is that bottom and mid funnel events basically go away. All right, so page view content, think of it as like top of funnel awareness. Those events still get sent, still get received, are still usable. But add to cart, initiate checkout, purchase, things that indicate intent. Again, go back to any of these use cases. If I add to cart the pregnancy test, Meta knows I'm interested in pregnancy tests. If I just click on the site, oh, maybe I clicked by accident. If those mid and lower funnel events go away, you can't optimize to those events effectively. And now you're stuck doing brand awareness only, reach only, top of funnel only. That's a doozy. That's a real doozy. So level two, that's a problem. Level three is basically blocking all events. And that's going to happen only in certain geographies. It's not entirely clear, but it seems like it's Europe. Think GDPR, Germany, UK, wherever.
Completely blind advertising.
Completely blind, like reach and frequency. It's basically TV out of home.
Wow.
Okay, so having said that, here's what's really dangerous. Whoa, that's scary. That's super scary if you're impacted, and if you're impacted with level 2 or level 3. So what I want to actually explain is, if you're watching this and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm scared. Well, it's really easy. You log into your account and you can literally see, has my website been flagged? Did they turn on level 1? Did they turn, like, you don't have to guess. You don't have to wonder. They're being very transparent about how you're impacted. And most brands are not going to be impacted.
Awesome. For those people who are listening to this, we'll make sure to walk through with our voices what we're looking at here. But Noah, do you want to share your screen now and we can walk through an actual example?
I will show you this actual example. So share screen. Okay, so this is the Meta Events Manager. And the Events Manager is the home for where you have your pixels and your data sets. You can see I'm looking at data sources. These are these different pixels or data sets. And the first thing you can see is that it says restrictions on data sharing starts in 36 days. Well, before it said starts in 6 days, I requested more time and I got 30 more days. All right. So
Awesome.
If you don't see this, you're probably not impacted. But if you go to settings, there's a whole new section that didn't used to exist that now exists. It's right here. Manage data source categories. So what this means is, if you're in your settings on your pixel and you click into your data source categories, you can see whether you've been flagged. So I'm showing you an example. This is a law firm that drives ads. It goes to people who were exposed to asbestos, then got cancer, and now are suing their old employer to get, compensation. Well, the fact that the domain name is called Cancer Legal Help is a bit of a problem.
I'll bet you that Meta's AI flagged that one.
Yeah. And I'm going to open up this website and you're going to see that the very first thing that this website asks you is, have you been diagnosed with cancer? That is not subtle. That is not beating around the bush. That is explicitly getting you to disclose your personal health information. The fact that that site got flagged is a surprise to nobody, right? Okay, so that's what I mean, that it's not going to affect most sites. Okay, so if you don't see anything on your domain list, you're good to go. So you log into your events manager, you go to your managed data source categories. If none of your domains have been categorized, you are good to go. And let's hover over this. So this explains, why is this a problem? The data source is the website or the app. Your website is associated with one or more medical conditions or health statuses. What does that include? Products, services, treatments, or information for specific conditions, including cancer, anxiety, arthritis, alcohol abuse, addiction, self-cutting, burning, etc. All right, so
is that just to the B then of all of that, or is there more beyond that?
That's for this particular categorization.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if you got categorized as a financial services brand, you're going to see a different warning here with different information. And if you feel like you got miscategorized, if you're like, whoa, what are you talking about? I sell yoga mats. Like, why are you calling me a health and wellness site? You can click view details and you can say, I would like to request a review. I think this was miscategorized because it was probably categorized by an AI bot and I want a person to look. Or maybe I had a problem and I made some changes and now I want you to look again. All right. So they've actually done a very, very good job. And you can see in the European region, data sharing may be blocked. In other locations, certain events may be blocked. Okay. So they're really doing.
Know which level we're at, Noah?
So that's what it's basically saying. So if you get to level 2, your events will be blocked. And based on the geography, in Europe, all the events are going to be blocked. In non-Europe regions, some events, which is mid and lower funnel. Gotcha. But I'm going to show you another tool. So manage data source categories. That's what we were just looking at. Again, that's in the settings on a given pixel. You might have more than one pixel. You can check all of them. And then this is the second thing. So this is level 1. So level 1 is something called core setup, data restrictions, core setup on. So it automatically turned this on for me. If you are not impacted, you have the choice to turn this on. Because this site is impacted, there is not a choice. It has been turned on automatically. And what does core setup do? Core setup starts to block certain custom events, it blocks certain metadata parameters, and it shortens the URLs. Again, I don't think that's that big of a deal. But imagine if
Why would a brand do that purposefully?
I can think of a great example. So we work with a lot of cannabis brands, hemp-derived THC brands. Maybe you've gone to great lengths to have your ads drive to an interstitial, which is kind of pseudo branded. And then when you say shop now, then it takes you to your Shopify store that sells your THC infused product. Well, you want your purchase events to not necessarily show that last site. Maybe you want it to be masked. Maybe you want it to show the second site. You might want to be a little bit discreet about where those events are coming.
Yeah. That makes total sense. And I can think about a lot of other sensitive categories where they have to go to interstitial sites.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully now, yes, we have a pretty clear understanding of if I'm impacted, what's going to happen? How can I tell if I'm impacted? But the last really big question is, what do I do about it? Okay.
Yeah, what
so
do you do if you're impacted?
So I actually rebuilt the site that we were just looking at. Can I pause sharing? I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to open up this site and I'll just show you what I did to address this.
And guys, if you're listening to this on podcast, you guys can go to YouTube, search for Jordan West, e-commerce entrepreneur, and you can see this video on YouTube.
Okay, so I'm going to reshare my screen, and this is just in staging because we haven't gone live yet. We have 36 more days. So this site before was called Cancer Legal Claims, and it literally had the word cancer in the site URL, and it had the word cancer front and center on the site when you show up. And then the first question it asked was, do you have cancer? That was a problem, not surprisingly. So we're going to register a new URL. It might be called asbestosexposureclaims.com. It's still directionally tied to what the law firm's doing. If you were exposed to asbestos and you got cancer, you have a claim, but it doesn't say cancer. So now if Facebook comes and scrapes the page, they're going to see asbestos exposure claims, not cancer claims. And what's the first question you're asked? Are you making this claim for yourself or a loved one? Maybe the bot clicks through. Was this person in the claim exposed to asbestos? Yes. Okay, so this is very important. It doesn't say you. It doesn't say, were you exposed to asbestos? It says, was the person in this claim exposed? And then it finally asks, was the person diagnosed with lung cancer? So here's the difference. If this data goes to Meta, Meta knows that somebody went to this site, they may or may not have filled it out for themselves, and that person may or may not have had cancer. That is not deterministic. The original site was crystal clear. If you filled it out, you had cancer. Yeah. So this might still get flagged. We're going to find out. We're going to launch this. We're going to see if it gets flagged. But this was, we had some meetings. We had some discussions. We read the information Meta shared with us. We thought about the why. Why did Meta flag this? And then we tried to be as thoughtful as possible to balance between meeting Meta's requirements and having a really good user experience that still makes sense. Anyway, I think that's a good example.
That's a really good example. So after you're done doing this, what do you do next? Like, how do you then take this new URL, right? Great question. New URL, bring it into your pixel.
Yep. So here's what we did.
Yeah.
So we created a new pixel. You can have as many pixels as you want. We created a net new pixel. We created a net new site. The new site is on a new domain. And with the new pixel and the new domain, all of a sudden we can run one test ad. We still have 36 days, tomorrow 35. It's going to keep counting down. But let's say on Monday, we launch a new test campaign. It goes to the new site. It has the new pixel, and it's on a new campaign. If the campaign runs and it's performing and we don't see that the new pixel got flagged, we're doing great. Problem solved.
Great.
If we see now the new domain got flagged, we have delivery errors, it's not tracking the events correctly. Okay, now we're in trouble.
Yeah, totally.
So it's just a way to isolate it and be able to really methodically know, is it working? Which part of it's breaking? Which part of it's not breaking? That's the system we came up with.
Wow, that's crazy. So sorry, anything to do with the ad account?
No, I don't think it has anything. I actually don't think it has anything to do with the ad account or the ads, right? So when you have an ad that's not compliant, the ad gets rejected, right? So you're in your ads manager, you get the little triangle, it says not delivering. What happened? Your ad got rejected, you get an email. This is not based on the ad. This is based on the website and the data being sent from the website to the pixel.
Gotcha. What else do we need to know? What haven't I asked you?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think that this is a brave new world every day. Every day that we wake up, the rules are changing. So, based on what we know this is going to impact some businesses starting in 6 days. Any business that's impacted can hit the button that I hit and said, give me more time. It kicks the can 30 more days. Hopefully, that gives you a little bit more breathing room. But first thing you should do, figure out if you're impacted. Figure out if your website's already been flagged. If it has been flagged, try to answer the question of why. It's going to give you some information, but are you talking about conditions? Do you use certain trigger words like cancer or credit or, pregnant or whatever? And then you have to figure out, is there a way to be true to our site, to our brand, to our customer experience, but more compliant? And I showed you an example of how we did our best to balance that. But all you can really do now is relaunch the new site, make sure that that site does not get flagged, maybe make changes to your existing site, and then hit that button that we looked at that said, I'm asking for a review. Please re-review this. And unfortunately, it's kind of a wait and see. But I do believe that knowing Meta, I know Meta very well. I've worked with them for more than 10 years. I've been a data partner for the last 3 years. Being a little crass here, but they're just trying to cover their own butts. They don't want to get sued. This covers their butt. They don't really care about what you're doing. They don't really care about the end user's privacy. They just care about their legal responsibility.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there anything that you guys are doing differently at Popsicle knowing this now?
So the changes that we launched this week, we had in the works anyway, but basically we see we're plotting the dots, we see where things are heading. We launched a whole bunch of new privacy controls. And basically what we're doing is we're piggybacking off of Shopify and their opt-outs. So if you say do not track me, or if you're based in a country where by default it's a do not track, like again, Europe, we have a new private mode where anyone who is in private mode, less data is being sent, and it's being sent in a de-identified way, or it's being sent in a like completely anonymized way.
Hmm.
Again, similarly, it's not on us to be the arbiter of this. It's on us as a tech partner to empower our customer to choose. We have 3 different levels: off, standard, and strict. And like you get to decide, do I want to be in strict mode, squeaky, squeaky clean, I'm never going to have a problem? Well, that might hurt my ad performance. Maybe I want to be in standard mode. Or maybe I don't care. Maybe I'm going to just wait until I get a letter served to me. But we're trying to empower people to A, understand what those settings mean, B, be transparent about what data is being sent or not sent, and C, feel empowered that they get to choose, they can change it, they're in control. That was sort of our best thinking.
How will brands that this affects know whether or not their ads are actually effective? So if they can't track bottom of funnel metrics, how will they know whether or not they are being effective or not?
Yeah, so the screen that I shared before, I can pull up again, but basically in the events manager, in that data restrictions, there's a section that says manage event blocking. So if you have events being blocked, they're going to show up there. So my page showed that my URLs had already been flagged. When we went into the data source section, it showed your URL's been flagged. When we went into the event blocking section, it didn't show it because it's not live yet. It's going to go live in 36 days, but presumably it would say your purchase events are being blocked. So you shouldn't have to guess. You shouldn't have to say, I wonder if it's affecting me. You should literally be able to look in the tool, check the screen, and if it says your purchase events are blocked, well, here's another workaround you can do. If you work with a partner like Popsicle, or if you build your own Cappy connection, this is a little bit of cheating. This is, again, up to you to decide if you're comfortable with this. Well, who's to say when a purchase event is sent, or sorry, when a purchase occurs, you have to send a purchase event? Why can't I hack my Cappy and say, well, every time we have a purchase, we're going to send a page view event. And now I'm going to optimize the page views. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And frankly, Meta doesn't care, but you could potentially get into trouble with your customers. Like your business still might get sued. If you're Johnson and Johnson, I would lose sleep over it. If you're one of the 4 million Shopify stores, I wouldn't lose sleep over it. But that is sort of a black hat cheating kind of workaround where you're manipulating the data type to get past the fact that they still let top of the funnel events through.
It's a very interesting workaround. Noah, what else? What have I not asked you today?
I think we've been pretty thorough. I mean, again, I think we've hit all the big things. And my biggest concern right now is there are a lot of people that I really, really respect who are trying their best to navigate this and they feel overwhelmed, or, by accident, we're sort of spreading misinformation or creating a sense of panic. The bottom line is 95 to 99% of businesses, this has zero impact on. And if you are impacted, you can find out immediately. And if you are impacted, there's lots of ways that you can solve this problem. So I want to get the fear gauge a lot lower. You should take this seriously. You should look into it. But like, let's keep calm here and let's just be compliant and make some adjustments.
Yeah, it's good to know that there are actual solutions for this. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And unfortunately, it's not as though Meta has been forthcoming with a lot of information for brands to figure
They're the
this out,
worst.
right?
Yeah. If anything, you may be impacted. And if you're impacted, you may have these devastating consequences. And you're like, well, am I or am I not? That was all their messaging until now. Now that we're getting closer to that kind of stroke of midnight where it goes live, I actually think they've done a good job. The tools are there. You just go to your events manager, click through all the different pages. They're actually doing a pretty good job of communicating at this point.
The sad news is I have talked to a lot of brands who this is actually affecting. I so far in my in who I talk to, there are a lot of brands that have had this flagged for them, and I would say it's probably closer to 20% right now.
Oh, wow.
And
I mean, that
so,
might just be the types of brands you work with. Maybe you over index with health and wellness. I'm
yeah,
thinking of like 4 million Shopify stores, you know, I
yeah,
don't know how many
absolutely.
are
I
impacted.
think I think also a lot of the health and wellness stores actually do a lot of volume, and
Sure.
so that's probably why we tend to see a lot of them. We also are really big on TikTok Shop and social commerce; those tend to do really well. On health and wellness tends to do incredibly well over there, and that's one of the bigger categories. So that's
Yeah.
probably again why I'm a little over indexed. And do actually think that it is a big deal to make sure that if you are affected, that you actually take action. Because I know that some people were like, I mean, what's the big deal?
No,
And
so just to be
yeah,
clear, like what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lower the level of fear and anxiety. This is absolutely a big deal. And it, again, like going back to the use cases, like there are lawsuits happening because there are people who are being hurt and their privacy is not being respected. And, it's on all of us as marketers to care about the experience of our end user. So it's definitely a big deal. I would say saying, oh, I'm not going to do anything is reckless. But I think there's a lot of businesses who I've talked to who are afraid that they're impacted and they're not, and they're kind of living in fear unnecessarily.
yeah, awesome. So first things first, guys, go into your events manager, go and check and see if you are affected. If you are not, you're okay. That's the biggest thing. If you are affected, then you need to take the steps. Noah, where can people contact you and learn a little bit more about how you can help?
Yeah, and again, like this is not my core business. I can feel that there's a lot of pain. I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm known as Digital Noah on LinkedIn and Twitter. It's Noah King at Popsicle. And basically, if you want to set up a call, like I'm happy to look at your site. If you want to hire me by the hour, like I can help you as an outside consultant, kind of make some recommendations on how to navigate it. But again, first and foremost, I just want people to feel empowered that they know where to look, and instead of sort of guessing and wondering and living in fear, they can deal with the actual problems that Meta has served to their actual account.
Awesome. Noah, this was so helpful. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. And again, we'll be navigating this together. So let's keep each other posted on the little wins we have as we help each brand.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Jordan.